Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing today? It's just too high. I think this is better. No.
Hey, Professor,
Hey,
what's happening?
can everybody hear me
Yes.
and see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
How are you? How's your day
Very
going?
good. Going good. Thank you for asking. It's been chill.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Can you also see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Let's get started.
All right, I'm
Um,
going on mute.
say that again.
I said I'm going on mute. I'm going to
Okay,
mute
that
myself.
sounds good. Okay, so I have a couple of questions. How many people receive alerts, maybe on their phone or on their tab, about certain updates being available? And that they should install that update? Do you normally receive alerts maybe on your iPhone or your Android telling you about updates that may be available and asking that you update your device? No?
Nope, not me.
Really?
Well, you know what? Update my device. Yes, I have gotten that, and I have
Yeah,
got the
security
update.
updates. Like virtually everybody should have gotten that.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. So today, for the past couple of classes, for the most part, people have been a little quiet. I want us to come off mute, speak, and stay engaged. Okay?
Okay.
Um, I don't want this to be a class where it's only a few people that are responding. Okay? So
Okay.
from time to time, get these updates on your phone or your tab or your laptops. What do you think those updates are meant for?
Security updates.
What do you think those updates are for?
Security
Um,
updates.
Patching vulnerabilities.
Very good. Patching vulnerabilities, very good. Security updates, very good. So a lot of organizations release these updates so as to help further secure our devices. It could be that they ran a scan and they identified certain weaknesses. And so when they identified the weakness, they package the solution to the weakness in form of updates. It could be a bug in the way the application works. Sometimes the applications on your devices are crashing. It could be a new feature that they want to make available. And a lot of times too, it is security updates to help keep the devices more secure. So those patches. And that's an end user's experience from a patch management point of view. What about from the perspective of the vulnerability manager, right? From the perspective of who is pushing out these vulnerabilities, what determines what should be patched, or how do they determine the patches that should be shared? Those are the things that we will be covering today. Okay. I want to ask a question too. If an organization found maybe 1,000 vulnerabilities, where do you think they should start from? Or say if you are the vulnerability manager and you found about 1,000 vulnerabilities, where would you start? If you found 1,000 vulnerabilities in your network, where would you start? Kaylan, if you found 1,000 vulnerability in your network, where would you start, Kaylan? Okay, Greg, where would you start? If you found 1,000 vulnerabilities in your network, where would you start? I'm assuming that Kaylan is not in class today. Where would you start?
If I found the vulnerability, I would try to mitigate it so it doesn't happen, and then try to figure out a patch for it.
So if you found 1,000, you try to mitigate all 1,000 and find a patch for it, right?
Right.
Okay. Sophia, what about you? Sophia, what about you? You find 1,000 vulnerabilities.
If I found that in my network, I would start I don't know, get back to me.
You don't what?
Get back to me on this question.
Get back to you. Did you say get back to you?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Devin, if you found 1,000 vulnerabilities in your network, where would you start?
I would start at the easier ones to patch the easier vulnerabilities.
Okay, okay. Milton, what about you? Where would you start?
What was the question?
If you found 1,000 vulnerabilities on your network, where would you start?
1,000 vulnerabilities?
Yes.
I don't know where I would start. Probably trying to figure out where it came from, best I could.
What would you start by if you want to patch those vulnerabilities, which one would you start from, or where would you start from?
I don't really know where I would start from.
Okay. Fair point. Philip, what about yourself? Philip, if you found 1,000 vulnerabilities on your network, where would you start from? Philip is absent.
No, I'm here.
Okay,
I got in
go ahead.
late, but I'm here. Well, based on the risk of the vulnerability, it could be internet facing issues or uh,
Go ahead.
um so I'll do maybe like a network check, maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Starting from the network here first.
Okay. Okay, so you said two things. Based on risk, I don't want you to lose that. James, what about you?
Did you call me?
Yes.
Man, I will start with my firewall. I would want to see if I have, the proper firewall settings adjusted, number one. And then I would want to check my network to find out what other IP addresses are accessing my network.
Okay, fair enough. So you have found 1,000 vulnerabilities on your network.
Yeah, I would want to see
Yeah.
internet exposure, exploitability. I'd check all of that.
Okay, so one thing that I want you to recognize is I said you found 1,000 vulnerabilities on your network.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily say that this was an incident. Okay?
It's vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities is weakness.
Right.
Okay? So you found 1,000 weaknesses on your network. How would you start? And I like the fact that a lot of people were very honest to say, I don't know where to start. Or, I don't know. Maybe check the firewall. Maybe check the internet-facing applications. So, that is what we are going to try to get to the bottom of in today's class. When weaknesses are found, not all weaknesses are the same. There are certain things that determine how patches are applied or how vulnerabilities are managed. So we're going to find out, or we're going to talk about those things that determines the vulnerability management decisions, scanning decisions, and patching decisions. And we're going to see the place we're going to see the place of audit and assessments in the grand scheme of vulnerability management. But before we do that, I want to show us something about penetration testing so that it will help us put things into perspective. Okay? So, steps and type. All right, so when an attacker is attempting to compromise a network, they do this in phases, okay? They do this in phases. Let me use this one. The first thing that an attacker would attempt to do, I'm going to open this image in new tab. The first thing an attacker will attempt to do is to do a reconnaissance or to conduct a reconnaissance. What does that mean? The information gathering. They gather information from the public space, from social media, from financial reports, from SEC websites. They gather information. When they gather information, then they start to narrow things down. Based on the information that is gotten, conduct scans. The scan can be passive, it can be active. So you go to Starbucks HQ, you do some level of information gathering, and you see that they have a wireless network. And then so an attacker gets in the mood of scanning. That scan can either be active or passive, or if it is through a phishing email, somebody clicks on a link, downloads, a bot, all right? or download a malware that allows for man in the browser attack. Or it could be any malware, and then the attacker starts to scan the network. After scanning the network, what they want to identify when they scan the network is the vulnerabilities that exist. Okay, so they've used an attack vector, leveraged that to get on the network, conducted certain scans, and found vulnerabilities. Now, one of the most prominent scanning tool that is used is Nmap. I believe I've shared with you before in all that know how to use Nmap Wireshark. So they use scanning tools, Nikto, Nessus, vulnerability scanning tool to find the vulnerabilities. First, they scan with Nmap, then maybe they now found that there is a certain operating system that is weak or that is exploitable. Then they scan. They conduct vulnerability scanning to find vulnerabilities. When they do find the vulnerabilities, then they exploit that vulnerability. Then maybe they gain access through remote execution. So they gain access. So he has shown reporting. This is penetration testing. I should actually use hacking, because penetration testing is more so something that you allow, although it is hacking, but it's something that you allow and you agree on. So yeah, so they scan, then they gain access. Okay, when they gain access, they find way of maintaining access. But one thing that helps them to gain access, or that always helps with gaining access, is scanning. And that scanning is where the vulnerabilities are identified. So the essence of vulnerability management is to find the vulnerability on your network and patch that vulnerability before an attacker does. Make sense?
Makes a lot of
Yes.
sense. Yes, yes, ma'am.
So before an attacker does, run your own health check. That's what vulnerability management is all about. And the decision is influenced by certain criteria. Okay, so vulnerability scanning is uncovering those weaknesses so that you can fix them. Okay, when it comes to understanding vulnerabilities, you need to understand the basics, and that hacking step that I shared with you gives you an insight as to the real essence for vulnerability scanning. And you need to understand the basics, the source of the data needed for the scanning, knowing the decision that must be made regarding the scan. So if you found 1,000 vulnerabilities, should you run after results after patching all 1,000? Philip said something, risk. You need to take a risk-based approach. How do you determine that risk-based approach? Okay, that's where we're going. All right, so running a scan, looking at the scan report, because when you run a scan, report is generated. You need to look at the report, interpret the report, and that report that will give you an insight as to where to start from. Okay, and so then you address the reported vulnerabilities. Okay, so vulnerability scanning is often an ongoing process. Now, what determines the frequency of scan is dependent on the devices we are talking about. If you have production devices, you don't want those devices to be to be blocked by constant scanning, because scanning requires resources. And so you don't want a situation where the resource that your organization, your devices, your servers should be using to provide the service is expended or is used up by the scanner. You want to target off-peak period. You want to target certain periods, certain times of the day, and also be strategic about the frequency of the scan. The device we're talking, that the device also has a part to play. The scanning frequency for a server is obviously not the same scanning frequency for a user endpoint. A user's a user is always taking their laptop from one place to another, accessing all different types of things. But in production, you have your network, you have your IP addressing scheme, you have your segmentation in place, you have your firewalls, you have your IPSs and IDSs, you have so much control in place, right? Or so much hurdle for a hacker to cross before they could actually get to your server. So the access control is tight. Okay? And so one specialized type of scan of vulnerability can examine applications. So when it comes to vulnerability scanning, you're looking at not only the operating system, not only vulnerabilities within the network, you're also looking at vulnerabilities in the libraries. The libraries are the dependencies that your application rely on. And then you are also scanning the applications themselves to see whether or not they are vulnerable. All right? So vulnerability scanning comes with its own challenges, as you would imagine. When you scan, the report is often huge. So analyzing the report can be a daunting task. Identification of the vulnerabilities also is dependent on, does the vulnerability scanner have the right access to be able to access or to be able to scan the server? So take, for example, you have an application server. Your vulnerability scanner can scan your application server with or without access credentials. So, but you will imagine that if it has credentials to log in, it will find more than when it does not have credential to log in. Okay? Then there are also technical limitations. For example, a port that might be flagged as vulnerable might be a port that your organization is relying on for legitimate service to run. Some libraries that your organization rely on, the organization application rely on, may contain certain, may be flagged by the scanner, but these are required for business use. Okay? Then remediation too can be a thing. Okay? But before we continue, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go online and do a quick search on real world incident, each person. Let's do this in 3 minutes. I want you to find real world incident that occurred as a result of weak vulnerability management practices.
Hey, Professor, is there a
Real,
specific website you want us to use?
no specific website. Find real world incidents that have occurred as a result of weak vulnerability management practices. I want you to read and come and explain to us what happened. Okay. What happened? What could have been done differently?
Could it be a person, as in for the real world example?
Yeah, it could. It could.
Okay.
If you have a personal experience, yes, that's fine. Then I would like to see real world incidents, preferably at an enterprise level, that have occurred as a result of poor vulnerability management practices. Let's do that in 5. Okay, so who wants to go first? Who wants to go first? All right. Ladies first. Sophia, I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
This incident occurred probably because they didn't have any firewalls built, so any hackers were able to get into the system without anything stopping them from tampering with any like sensitive information.
Where did
And
that happen and when?
say it again.
Where did that happen and when?
You said where did it happen?
Yes, and when?
It happened with a hold on, I just had it up. There was an incident in I believe it was Australia. They had uh banks encrypted information stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And they encrypted information stolen. Basically the hackers got into the bank accounts through through the employers, and they stole all of these customers' data.
Okay, how is that linked to vulnerability management?
It connects because the vulnerability part is the fact that everything wasn't like secure. Like they had some of the people's data was not how do I see it? Um Not 100% safe. That's how it was so easily taken away from them, and they had money stolen.
Okay, Sophia, I need you to pay attention, okay? And use the right terminologies, right? Greg, go ahead.
Find a
Your microphone is going out. You sound far away. It's going in and out. I can barely hear you.
the U.S. government or the CIA was spying on
Is
its
it just
own
me?
people in
Guys,
the
is
United
it just
States.
me? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Greg.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear me?
Okay, yeah, sounds better now.
Oh, bad. Sorry. Um, yeah. So the article that I found was about Gregory Snowden. He was a U.S. citizen that was working for the CIA at the time, but then he revealed that in I believe this was 2013, 2015 timeframe. He revealed that the US government was secretly using the Patriot Act to collect phone records and phone information and tracking our calls and things. And he exposed the CIA for doing that.
Okay. So I want you to link that to vulnerability management, poor vulnerability management practices.
Yeah, so I think that so in the article it said that he was able to gather some of the information and sneak it out of a facility. So I think the vulnerability is the people they hire and being able to um, mitigate the vulnerability opportunities so people don't gather the information out of nowhere. So what I mean by that is him having the ability to take that information out of the facility was something that the U.S. government did not even think about when it came to vulnerability management, their own employees.
Okay.
I found one, Professor. Can I
The-
share?
Who's that?
That's James.
Go ahead, James.
The Equifax data breach of 2017, which was, a real world vulnerability in management practices, which compromised the personal data of 147 million Americans. What happened was the unpatched software was vulnerable. So attackers, were able to exploit known remote code execution, known as CVE 2017-5638, which was on the Apache Struts web framework trying to alert those the IT department, the framers of Equifax, that they originally discovered some vulnerabilities when it came to the dispute portal at Equifax. So the Equifax IT team and the developers, they ignored the alerts. And that caused, back in 2017, for hackers to maintain and access for 75 days expired internal security certificates that blinded the network monitoring tools alongside flat internal network architecture that allowed free movement of data. And I'm talking 147 million Americans, and I was inclusive of that data breach with Equifax.
That is a world-class textbook example of an incident that occurred as a result of poor vulnerability management practices. Classic example.
Yes, ma'am. If it resulted in $700 million settlement commissioned by the FTC and the state regulations, because
Did you get some? Did you get some of the money?
I did. I got $60.
See that?
Mhm.
All right. So what happened was there was a vulnerability in the Apache web service. The patch was available, but it didn't patch. The patch had been available. They didn't patch the servers. One of the reasons why that happened was lack of proper governance structure. One team was like, it's our responsibility. The other team is like, it's not our responsibility. And that resulted into a major data breach. I think we can leave it at that, okay? So that helps show the value of vulnerability scanning and timely. Imagine a vulnerability that allowed for remote code execution. It means the attackers were somewhere and they could remotely execute code on the target environment. Okay? So, what determines, we're going to go back to threat management, but I want us to look at vulnerability scanning a little deeper. What determines how scanning should be done or what should be scanned? The first thing is that when it comes to vulnerability management is determining what should be scanned. So before performing a vulnerability scan, it's important to know the value of specific data. Organizations have tons of servers, tons of endpoints. Prioritization becomes very key. Prioritization of the server, how important or critical it is, and that's determined by the data that it holds. Data should be classified into groups. And so, for example, if you have a server that holds confidential information and sensitive information or public information, you want to classify each server at the highest level of data that they hold. Once the criticality of the data or the class of the data is identified, then that speaks directly to its value. And that will also determine the type of scan that should occur on that server and the frequency, how often it should be scanned. Okay? So when it comes to scanning, there is network scan. The network scan identifies network-related attack and vulnerable system on a wired network. Then you have endpoint scanning. Endpoints looks at your servers, your workstation, your switches, your routers, and provide visibility into the configuration settings, the patch history of that endpoint. For example, Microsoft releases their patches, I think every second Tuesday of the month. They call it Patch Tuesday. So for every Microsoft operating system, they release patches every second Tuesday of the month. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at the patch history and making sure those patches are applied as at when we're not done with the subject of criticality yet. You know, we've talked about classification of the assets, but then not all vulnerabilities too are the same. Some vulnerabilities are critical, some are high risk, some are medium, some are low risk, and some are just informational. So when I asked the question of you have 1,000 vulnerabilities, where do you start from? You start from the most critical vulnerabilities. So then you also have wireless scanning. That's where you identify rogue access points, validate that your wireless network is secure. Remember when I shared how I'll go from one floor to another on the 27th, and we'll go through the 27 floors of the bank that I worked for, scanning for rogue access points. Any wireless network that exists that does not belong to the organization. Okay? Then there's also database scanning. These help identify weaknesses in the database. Then you have application scanning. The web application, other software applications, detecting weaknesses in them, or even erroneous configuration that might exist in them. Okay? So hardware, software, network, wired, wireless, operating system. Okay? And so scanning can be active and it can be passive. Active scanning is where the scanner is testing the network by sending traffic. It sends test traffic into the network and monitors for response. Passive scanning does not send any transmission, but instead it listens to the normal traffic. It listens and try to learn information. All right? When the scanning is active, information gathering is accelerated. You get information quickly, as opposed to when the scanning is passive. Okay? And then also, not all parts of the network will always be available, and this can limit the abilities for the passive scan to produce optimal results, right? Then, scanning can be internal and it can be external as well. What does that mean? Internal vulnerability scan is when the scanning is performed within the vantage of the organization, within the premise on the internal network. Okay? External scanning is performed from outside of the network. So targeting specific IP addresses that are within the network from outside to identify, just in case an attacker from outside is attempting to. Then, when should vulnerability scanning be done? It depends on the criticality of the server and the service it's running. It's often good to also spread it out across different specific times. And we'll talk about vulnerability scanning best practices too. It's often good that it's done off hours or weekends, especially for production servers. While you can scan users' laptops and endpoints on an ongoing basis, for production servers, off hours, weekends, off-peak period, those are the good times to consider when determining the scan period. Okay? Then specific regulations too can detect how quickly, or can determine, I should say, the frequency of scanning. For example, you have PCI DSS. PCI DSS have some requirements around how often vulnerability scanning should occur. Okay? So, for example, you have your PCI DSS. If you look at the PCI DSS, the standard talks about the frequency of vulnerability scanning. Look at, I think that should be requirement 5 and 6. Okay, so requirement 5 talks about maintaining a vulnerability management program. Requirement 5 talks about protecting all systems and network from malicious software. So they are sometimes prescriptive about how often. This will be policies. 512 will be anti-malware is deployed, detected and blocked, list. They are sometimes prescriptive about specific timing. Anti-malware solution is up to date. So all this talking about anti-malware audit, anti-phishing, 6, security vulnerabilities are, so 6.3 for the most part. 6.1.2. Bespoke and custom software developed securely. Let's go to 6.3. Right. So 6.3 says new vulnerabilities are identified using industry recognized sources for security vulnerability information, including alerts from international and national computer emergency response team. Vulnerabilities are assigned a risk ranking based on industry best practices. Risk ranking identify at a minimum all vulnerability considered to be high risk and critical for the environment. Vulnerabilities for bespoke and custom and third-party software are covered. Okay. And so you have all of these. Let me see. Sometimes some of these regulations are very prescriptive about the frequency. So organizations need to be aware of the regulations that they must adhere to and follow the prescription, the requirements. See, these are some prescriptions here, 12 months, at least 12 months, public-facing application. So they're saying reviewing public-facing web application via manual or automated application vulnerability security assessment tool. Okay? Or methods as follows. They are prescriptive at least once every 12 months or after significant change. See? So every web application must be, there are others. This is just one. Okay? At least on an annual basis, they're saying you must do web application scan. That's where a lot of organizations do. Sure. You may be excused, James.
Thank you, Professor. I'll look at the rest of the video.
No problem.
All righty.
All right. So scanning decision also should be as a result of the organization's risk appetite. System with low risk appetite can be scanned more frequently, while those other ones that are not should be scanned like production, zero tolerance for downtime. Also like critical infrastructure systems, they have zero tolerance for downtime. So they require adequate planning when it comes to vulnerability scanning. There are different tools for vulnerability scanning. OpenVAS is one that is open source. You could actually download that and install it and scan your home network. Invicti is one that is used for web applications. You have Nexpose, you have Nessus, you have Nikto. There are different ones. And so after selecting the vulnerability scanning tool, the software plugins need to always be up to date. That way, they are getting threat feeds, okay? So that brings me to the topic of threat intelligence, all right? When we talk about vulnerabilities, how do organizations and even how will the vulnerability scanners know that this thing is a vulnerability or this component has a vulnerability? That's where your threat intel comes in. It is the process of collecting data about threat actors' motives, about their targets, about their tactics, and even the attack behaviors. Getting all of those threat intelligence, and where does those threat intelligence go to? Most times those threat intelligence, they come from different sources, and your scanner, vulnerability scanner, should be able to get those threat intel. Not all, but at least most of the threat intel, so that it can scan your environment against them. Okay? So a lot of times too, there are organizations that monitor the dark web. They monitor the dark web to gather intelligence about what data may have been exposed, so that they help organizations make informed decisions. Some other organizations also, they do what is called a bug bounty program. Bug bounty program is a way of inviting researchers to find bug in an organization's environment in their application and report it. and so that they can get rewarded for it. Okay. There was, in fact, U.S. Army, they conducted a bug bounty program. They started it in 2021, I believe. I mean, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. They've conducted, I believe, about 3 or 2. So they authorized group of people or group of security researchers to act the army. And when they conducted the first one, see, that success was followed by Act the Army 2.0 in 2019. Okay, they did the 2.0 in 2019. They did a previous one, yes, 2016, where they found 100 and I believe 140 something vulnerabilities on the Army's public-facing website. And so it goes to tell you that the Army itself needed intelligence from outside to be able to strengthen their security posture. Okay, so the Defense Department have this bug bounty program that they call Act the Army, and vulnerabilities were identified, even critical ones. So that's what bug bounty programs are. Google paid a Chinese hacker, I think over 100 and something thousand, some years ago when they found vulnerabilities in their Google Pixel mobile phone. So the bug bounty program is where organization is a program that organization put together to invite security researchers to identify bugs in their program and report them. Now, when it comes to the web, there are 3 layers of the web: the clear web, the deep web, and the dark web. See, where you find, where we do our Google, our Yahoo search, and all of those search, that is clear web. Deep web is when these are subscription based, where you have to subscribe. There are certain applications that belongs to the deep web, or certain databases that belong to the deep web. For example, we were talking about Shodan the other time. The information you will find on Shodan, you cannot find it on Google. Then you have the dark web. The dark web is where those illegal activities happen. As security professionals, we have common enemies. And so because we have common enemies, one thing that makes us stronger together is to be able to share information with one another. Okay? So there are information sharing organizations that gather, collate, and analyze threat intelligence. And so, Sherry, you see, the Defense Department is often in the forefront of this. They will say, oh, they've noticed that certain pattern, and expecting and warning organizations about those attack types. It's information sharing. Organizations leverage those collective. Yes, they are, Greg. Deep web are more legitimate threat intelligence. For example, there's a company called Recorded Future. They have threat intelligence. They help organizations monitor and inform them about their exposure, their data being exposed to the dark web. But the dark web is where all of those Social Security 147 million records that were stolen from Equifax and all of the different data breaches, that is where those data are traded. Each person's Social Security, personally identifiable information costs between $1 to $16. I think $1 to $16 or $4 to $16. And so that's why stealing those data and reselling them in the dark web is very lucrative. Imagine stealing 147 million records, even if it's sold for a dollar each. Okay. All right. So when it comes to information sharing, it's important for organizations to work with one another to share information. You have the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. They put together what is called the Cyber Information Sharing and Collaboration Program. That program includes different, if you Google it, you'll see it. It includes analyst to analyst technical exchanges. It includes analytics of different products. It includes cross-industry orchestration and even malware analysis. So all of this threat intelligence is what the vulnerability scanners rely on too. Then when it comes to sharing or exchanging of this threat intelligence information, there is an automated, or there is a communication mechanism that made it possible for computers to actually communicate with one another to share threat indicator. And that is called the automated indicator sharing. It enables the exchange of cyber threat indicators. And it uses two tools, the STIX and the TAGSI. TAGSI, just the way the name implies, is the one that is responsible for moving the threat intelligence information from one computer to another. Okay? The STIX itself is the language or the structure that the information is expressed in. That's why it's called structured threat information expression. It is the way, the structure for the information. While the TAGSI, trusted automated exchange of intelligence information, is the mechanism for transferring that information from one computer to another computer. While there are threat maps, closed threat intelligence solutions, there are also open source intelligence tools, often known as OSINT. And these open source, they are free and they are available for public use. And so you can find them. For example, the OpenVAS is one. There are also organizations, security organizations, that put together open source threat intelligence platform in form of threat maps. So, for example, if I go to Checkpoint, they have a threat map. It's not even only Checkpoint that has threat map. A lot of security companies have their threat maps. So this one is for, I'm going to show you this. I'll probably open this in a new tab. Was too late. So this is by Radware, and it's showing live threat map. What is under attack? Who is under attack? The top attackers, the top attacked, the top network attackers. You see over here, this statistics is within the last hour. Top attackers are in the United States, UK, Germany. Top attacked is also the United States, India, Canada, Australia, and Japan. Top network attack vectors, they are using UDP flood, TCP flood, low and slow attack. IP flood, DNS flood. Top application violation, access violations, injection attack types. Okay. Then you have this one that is from, and you see how the map is showing what is going where. Right? It's showing what is going where. We can see China, US, Canada, like that. You see the same thing here. Targeted countries, targeted firms, targeted industries. And you see this one is Russia to Russia, Colombia to Colombia, China to China, Korea to Korea, and United States. You see a lot of things going on within the US. Those are threat maps that these companies have made available that illustrates the cyber threats. They help visualize the countries that are being attacked and things like that. Like this was the one we just saw right now. Okay. All right. So quick knowledge check. Why are open source libraries vulnerable? Why are open source libraries vulnerable? Is it because these libraries are not owned and controlled by any single entity? Is it because they use coding tools that are considered inferior to standardized tools? Is it because they are stubs that cannot be properly verified for malware? Which one? Respond in the chat. Let's go, let's go, let's go. It is, hey, they are not owned, nor are they controlled by a single entity. So we've talked about the scanning decisions. A threat intelligence is a major source of information for the vulnerability scanners to operate optimally. Okay. So when you now talk about the scanners themselves, again, they are different. There are lots of them. Qualys, Nikto, Nexus. OpenVAS is free, is open source, is OSINT. Then after selecting the vulnerability scanning tool, those threat feeds need to be accessible so that the scanner itself can be up to date and it can be scanning again the servers, the endpoint, against the threats that it has already, the updated threats it has in its database. So when it comes to running vulnerability scan, you need to first determine the scope. What's the scope of the vulnerability? That's the targeted devices that needs to be scanned. The scope can be set by using environmental variables, which are variables whose values are set outside the program. So it can be based on IP address. You might need to even exclude certain systems or certain servers from the scanning. So you have an exclusion list. You could scan certain libraries and exclude certain libraries. The scope is very important. Then the sensitivity level is the depth of the scan. What should the vulnerability scanner scan for? What type of vulnerabilities is it looking for? And you can also specify the data types that is to be scanned as well. So scoping is very important. And when it comes to network security. There are some network security tools that might prevent the vulnerability scanners from working accurately. So we need to exclude or create an exclusion list for the vulnerability scanners on those network security tools. You need to tune the network security, because the network security tool like your IPS and IDS might be viewing your legitimate vulnerability scanner as an attacker who is trying to attack the network. So your network security tools need to be aware of your vulnerability scanner's existence so that it does not disrupt its legitimate functions. Okay? Then testers should also have permissions from internal supervisors to software used to access approved systems. A scanner can operate in two major ways. It is probing from a pull point of view or from a push point of view. What does that mean? The scanner is pulling information from the system that it is scanning, or there are agents already installed on those systems, and the agents are doing the scanning and pushing the report to the scanner for analysis. Okay, so software agents might be installed on the server. That is a push scanning technology. A pull is when there is probe coming from the scanner to the server. All right? Okay. Let me take a pause. What are your questions? Questions. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat too. So when it comes to vulnerability scanning, I mentioned earlier, when you have access credentials to log into a server, you find more information on that server as opposed to when you do not. So there are two types of scan that can occur: this credential scan and non-credential scan. Credential scan means that the scanner or the scanning engine has credentials to be able to log in to the server to conduct the scan, just the way a threat actor needs credentials, or assuming they've stolen credentials. Okay. Non-credential scan is when you don't provide it any form of authentication information, and it's just scanning without credential. Obviously, credential scan will get more information than non-credential scan. Now, scanning is completed. You have scoped appropriately, excluded what needs to be excluded. The scanning engine is getting the right information from threat intel. You have scanned. Now, the reports or the scan results. The scan results need to be validated. The scan results need to be validated for accuracy. And so when it comes to validation, there is what is called true positive. True positive is when the scan result is accurate, it triggers what needs to be triggered. That is true positive. It triggers an alarm where an alarm should be triggered. Then you have true negative. True negative is where the attack would trigger no alarm. So there is an attack, but no alarm is raised. That is true negative. You don't want that. Then you have false positive, is when an alarm is raised where there is no problem. And then finally, you have false negative. It is the failure to raise an alarm when there is issue. At every point in time, what we are aiming for is true positive. Okay? All right. And when you get the result needs to be interpreted or needs to be shared with the different audience. And the need for each audience is different. If I'm coming as a CISO and I am presenting the security, the vulnerability posture or the security posture of the organization to the board, would it be appropriate for me to be sounding technical? I'm sure you say no. They want to generally see the latest scan. They don't want to know whether it can lead to remote code execution or not. What they want to hear is risk. It's critical, it's medium, how serious it is, how it has been addressed in the past, whether it has been addressed or how it will be addressed. That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear, or they may not even be interested in hearing how it will be addressed, because that could dive into technical details. Maybe more so how long it will take to address them. It's different from when you're talking to a systems engineer or a network engineer. Of course, they are the ones that will address that will patch the vulnerabilities. So you want to make sure that you are listing the specific vulnerabilities, the details, and how to fix the problem to them. The same thing goes for the application developers. All the issues with the application, they need to know so that they can patch. Security team wants to see the security details, of course. They want to know what system is vulnerable. The details of what, like, the honest truth is that vulnerabilities can exist, but not all vulnerabilities are exploitable. And so the level of effort that is required to exploit a vulnerability is also a decision-making criteria or decision is influencing criteria when it comes to patch management. Now, the criteria for addressing those vulnerability or prioritizing the vulnerability is often based on some numeric values. Certain organizations are starting to move away from these numeric values, but these are the best known numeric values. So each vulnerability is categorized based on a scoring system. The first scoring system is the CVSS score. And this CVSS score takes into consideration the access vector, how complex the attack is, whether authentication is required or not, whether it compromises the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data or not. So a score is assigned based on that. Another ranking that is used, or system of ranking that is used, is common weakness enumeration. This one ranks based on vulnerability classification system. Okay, so if you look at Criteria for ranking vulnerability may include criticality of vulnerability identified in an alert from FIRST or CERT, consideration of the CVSS score, the classification of the vendor, and or type of systems affected. You see, they refer to the CVSS score. It said vulnerabilities that are scored 4.0 or higher by the CVSS are resolved. So PCI DSS is saying that for external vulnerability scan, when you perform it, make sure anything that is 4.0 or higher is resolved. And we scan to make sure that the patch actually worked. Scan should be performed by qualified personnel. So when we talk about CVSS score, anything 9.0, so it uses this scoring system. 9.0 to 10, critical. 7.0 to 8.9, high. 4.0 to 6.9, medium. 0 to 3.9, low. 0 is for informational purposes only. So PCI is saying anything that's a 4.0 to 10 must be patched. Okay, so this is CVSS scoring. Then you have the CWE scoring. And it's based on MITRE ATT&CK. It's also calculated based on the score of 0 to 100. So a lot of times you find most organizations leaning more towards, let me look at the images here, leaning more towards CVSS. There are other methods, but those are the two most common ones. Right? Then once vulnerabilities are prioritized, you need to take the following steps: patch and harden. Address difficult vulnerabilities, identify exceptions and exemptions, analyze network segmentation, and verify that it has been mitigated indeed. So, quick question. Boris Code needs to specify which vulnerabilities needs to be included in the next vulnerability scan. What parameter must he set? What parameters must he set? If you say scope, then you will be correct. What questions do you have? What are your questions? What are your questions? What are your questions? What are your questions? Okay. Now, audit and assessment. Audit and assessment. Audit is conducted to examine and verify accuracy. You look at the result, you verify its accuracy. Assessment, on the other hand, is a judgment that is made about the results. And this looks at the necessary actions that need to be taken. What do we need to conform with? So an audit can be conducted, but you need to take that report, the audit report, and assess it for conformity. And whether it is audit or assessment, both of them can be done either internally or external. Internal audits is when you have, I remember 2019, I joined an organization leading their security and privacy assurance. And so they needed to achieve ISO, PCI, iTrust. They've been finding it difficult too. Then I got into the organization. One of the things that helped after the initial phase of certification is instituting an internal audit team. Because then we're conducting a self-assessment before the external auditors came. The challenge was that they were inviting external auditors. External auditors were finding faults that they should have found before the external auditors came. So instituting an internal audit or self-assessment team was very helpful. And there is a place for managing the efficacy of the audit team, or there are some criteria for making sure that the audit team is effective. And one criteria is ensuring that there is no conflict of interest. The audit team, for example, cannot be a part of the team that is creating the process or that owns the process and also auditing the process. So we're talking about vulnerability management now. You cannot be the vulnerability manager and be the one auditing yourself at the same time. So conflict of interest must be addressed. And in addressing conflict of interest, it's often good that the internal audit reports directly to the board, to the audit committee on the board. All right, so that there is no conflict of interest. External auditors could also come. These are often called independent third parties. You have your E&Y, your KPMGs, your Deloitte, those big fours, your Shellman, Coldfire, those are external third parties that they come, they check for conformity with regulations. They assess against standards, against regulations. They assess the organization security postures against pretty much standards and regulations. And make sure that they are following, they are there. Where there is deviation, they call out the deviation. And they give the organization, that gives the organization the opportunity to fix the gap or to close the gap. Vulnerability management is different from penetration testing, but they are the same in a way. Penetration testing is more so mimicking an attacker. So while vulnerability management is you conducting, testing your system or scanning your system for vulnerabilities and patching those vulnerabilities. Penetration testing, on the other hand, is validating the exploitability of the vulnerabilities. So yes, vulnerability scan is one component of penetration testing, but then when it comes to penetration testing, you're not stopping at the penetration testing level. That's why you saw that step that I showed in the beginning. You are trying, the tester is attempting to exploit, validating the exploitability. So while vulnerability scanning is defensive rather, penetration testing is on the offensive side. And when it comes to penetration testing, one thing that is very, very important is what is called rules of engagement. There are people that have found themselves in jail because of lack of clarity in the rules of engagement. There was a situation, I believe in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, with some auditors from Coalfire. They got out, but I think it was in Dallas, not Georgia. No, Coalfire security tester in Iowa. They were arrested in Iowa, sued Dallas County. Now, even before they sued, they were, Gary and Justin. They were both working for Coalfire. They got arrested during their penetration testing work. Why? They thought that the penetration testing rules of engagement included physical penetration testing. And so they tried physical testing off hours. Alarm triggered, the police came, and they got, they paid them. Wow, I think they paid them this year. This is interesting to know. This has been since 2020, 600K. Wow. That means they won the case. Okay. So it's important for the rules of engagement to be clear so that there is no case. They thought that not that they thought, I would say the rules of engagement was misconstrued, because now that they won, it means that they probably were right about their rules of engagement, and the court was the one that was wrong, I would want to believe. But yeah, they went for this penetration testing activity, physical, in the night, and they were sent to jail. So rules of engagement need to be clear, properly communicated with key stakeholders when conducting penetration testing. Okay. So it can be conducted by internal employees, but a lot of times internal employees only have inside knowledge. When it's conducted by external employees, like PCI said that you should get an ASV, approved scanning vendor. Because those approved scanning vendors have been exposed to different environments, they have more skills than internal red team. They have a lot more skills and exposure. So they are able to perform better. Right? When hiring external third parties, though, the expertise, the credential, the experience, the area of focus needs to be taken into consideration. area of focus being the rule of engagement. Okay. I already walked us through the steps: footprinting and reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, covering tracks. Okay. So comparing both of them side by side, the purpose of vulnerability management is to reduce attack surface. But on the other hand, pen test is to identify deep vulnerabilities. Vulnerability scanning scans for weakness and mitigates them. Penetration testing acts like threat agents, find the vulnerabilities and attempt to exploit or exploit. Whether to exploit or not is based on the rules of engagement. The frequency for vulnerability scanning is more often than penetration testing. It's usually ongoing. As you saw in PCI required once a year, but some organizations do conduct penetration testing more than once a year. Internal folks do VUL scanning. External folks do pen testing. Internal personnel can also do it, but when it comes to regulatory requirements, third parties are preferred. The process is often automated. Penetration testing is often manual. But now there are automated not automated, autonomous penetration testing solution now. So these autonomous penetration testing solution, they act as pen testers that are always on the network testing the net, or that is always on the network. One that I am very familiar with is Horizon 3. It's an AI solution that does pen testing. So we can't say that penetration testing is entirely manual anymore, with the AI solutions being able to do the same. The goal of VUL scanning is to identify risk in the environment, but the goal of penetration testing is to gain unauthorized access and actually exploit the vulnerabilities. Final report audience is usually for less technical audience, technical details executive summary for less technical audience and technical details for security professionals. However, with penetration testing, there are several audiences, both internal and external. Your third party, your customers. Customers want to see, when you conducted your pen test, what did you find out? Auditors want to see. So you have several different audience interested in penetration testing. Last question of the day. Constantine has been asked to explore part of the web that is the domain of threat actors, to look for information about the latest types of attack. What area of web should he go? Dark web, deep web, black web, restricted web. If you say deep web, the dark web, you'll be right. The dark web is like the deep web, but that's where illegal stuff happens. So where the buying and the selling is happening, that's where it can actually find the information that have already been leaked about the organization. So I want you to take time to see whether or not you can list the reasons for conducting a vulnerability scan. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. If you score less than 4, you should go back and review the module rather. Describe the different scanning decisions. What influences the scanning decisions? How is vulnerability scanning run? And what part does audit and assessments have to play? So we've talked about the essence of vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, the considerations, the technicalities, the criticality of different vulnerabilities, and how to patch them. And this brings us to the end of this topic. So you should be able to answer all these questions. What are your questions at this time? So we have 3 more classes to go: incident preparation and evidence, oversight and operations, information security management. I have to see you guys next week. I'm looking. I have a question regarding something else. Sophia has a question regarding something else. All right. Go ahead, Sophia. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Second. If you don't have any other question, you're welcome to drop off. I'll see you